All right, so the first step for this van is to install the Traxda 2-inch lift kit all around. I'm going to start in the rear. From the videos I've seen and everything, that seems to be the hardest. Little caveat to everyone here, I'm not a mechanic. I'm just putting this together as far as how to install this set based on the instructions provided by Traxda and a couple other videos, or really one video in particular that I watched that was on YouTube. So kind of putting it all together. This is, but I'm also going to install these airbags in the rear coils while I'm in the process. But with Traxda, they have two kits. One doesn't include the sway bar links. It's a little cheaper, but it says some models need them. I'm not really sure what models do, but I went ahead and bought the more expensive kit. This is all made in the USA. It's steel. It's not a nylon or anything. So these, this one right here would be the rear spacer. Of course, you have two, and then that would be the spacer for the front. The front one sits on top of the strut, and the spacer for the rear sits on top of the spring. As we get going, you'll see that. And then these are rear shock extensions. I didn't get all the sockets out yet. I'll name them off as I go, but impact wrench, not required, but helpful. Smaller electric socket wrench there if I need it. Figure I'll probably need a big crescent wrench at some point in time. Now, I'm fortunate. My van is a West Coast van all its life, so there's very little corrosion, but particularly if you were in an area where you did have a lot of corrosion, you know, WD-40 or a PDE blaster, probably better to loosen up some of your bolts. Got the van prepped. So, of course, I don't have a lift, so I'm probably like most of you watching this, just doing it in my garage here. Got it lifted up using the jacking points in the corner. I've got jack stands, pulled the wheels off. Like I said, we will be putting spacers on there. So before I jacked it up, I actually popped off this body panel, and I'll be loosening that up shortly. And they said the first steps down here is to remove these little connector plates here. So these, I think one's a brake and one's for the ABS line. I think this is the ABS line, and this would be the brake line, of course. Loosen these up so this moves. Loosen up the, I guess that'd be the control arm bushing there. Does not say take it out, so just loosen that up and remove the lower shock bolt. And theoretically, this whole lower axle should drop and this spring should come out. This is just something I'm doing, trying to front load and make this a little bit easier on the install. From the videos I've seen, and I'm sorry, let me caveat one thing. As the title indicated, this is a front wheel drive. So if you had an all-wheel drive, meaning you had a drivetrain here in the back, the procedure is going to be similar, but a few more steps. You would have to remove the axle shaft. I've seen some people drop the drive shaft. Basically, this is just for a front wheel drive only. If you had an all-wheel drive, this might give you some basis, but there would be some more steps. But anyways, when I go to put this spring back in, obviously it's going to be a lot taller because I'm going to have the spacer in there. I've got some spring compressors, but what I'm going to do is, you guys can see there's not much space in there, is I'm going to put some blue tape. Maybe I'll do blue for the driver's side and orange for the passenger side. And I'm going to put the tape where I think I could get the spring compressors in there. That way, when I go to compress it on the desk or on my bench, I can put it in that area, and that way I know when I go to slip it in here, I'll have enough clearance. That sounds like a good idea. We'll see if it is in practice. I'll come back to you guys in a few minutes. All right, guys. So this was pretty easy. Like I said, I didn't really have any corrosion issues. Take off the shock bolt, which is right down here. That's 19 millimeter, and then don't remove it, but loosen this torsion arm here, kind of like a control arm. Also 19 millimeter. I had slightly depressed the spring, and then I removed the top bolt of the shock from the inside, and this was my error. I didn't realize that this was going to drop so low, the springs literally just fell out. I think I'm okay, but I didn't remove this ABS cable. I didn't realize this whole thing was going to drop as low as it did. It basically went all the way to the ground, which kind of surprised me. That was my error on that. So just so you know, and it tugged it out of here. I just turned the van on and the ABS light went off. It went off. So I'm hoping I didn't damage anything. My assumption is if I ripped out the electrical cable someplace, it would have the light would have came on. So we'll have to see, but pretty easy. Like I said, if this was all-wheel drive, you'd have to remove the axle nut and a couple other things. There's another video of a guy who does an all-wheel drive one on there, and this is where I'm getting most of the info. But so the springs are out. We're gonna get those prepped, and we'll put the top shock extensions on here, and we'll probably start getting this bad boy reassembled. One other note, and maybe there was a trick I'm unaware of, but the top of the shock was threaded. This little washer sitting here, and here was the nut. When it popped out, it kind of popped out forcefully, and on this side I lost the nut someplace back in here. I'm sure I'll find a replacement. I'm not too worried about it. But when I took this one off, I actually threw a rag in there. That way, if it popped out forcefully, I could catch it, and I was able to save this one. So just a little tip there. If there's another old school trick how to get those off, somebody posted in the comment as far as that bolt not flying everywhere. All right, guys. So we are prepping the spring. I've got they're slightly compressed with the coil or the spring compressor. I had actually installed this before I took them out. So there is a little bit of question in terms of the order. So this is a device called an isolator. It's like rubber, okay? And this sits in the upper cup, what would be like on the floor of the van, and then the spring sits below it. And my assumption is this provides a dampening, because it's rubber, so there's, not road vibration that's transferred into the body of the van. Now, this is a spacer, and this could actually fit two ways. I keep referencing a video that I primarily got most of my information from. It's called The Other Guys. I'll link it in the description. Pretty good video. The instructions from Traxda do not include any images, and they're just very brief text. And it says to insert the spacer, so this would be the upper part of the spring, on the spring, and then it says comma on top of the dampener. Now, my best way that I can interpret that would be they're saying put it on top of the spring, but on top of the dampener. So therefore the dampener would sit here, and then the spacer would sit like this, and then this would sit up in the cup of the vehicle like that. That other guy's video, he actually had it reversed. He put the dampener up in here, which he had made note that it's not a perfect fit, and I agree with him, and this might be an indication as to where the actual order is. This is not to bash that guy either. It's just it is a question. So he was saying put the dampener on top and then the spacer, and then put the spacer directly on the spring. And I have to admit, in some ways that makes more sense because it's kind of more stock. But one thing I notice is the spacer moves around in here. And my gut instinct is, as the suspension moves, that could move in there. But if you put the dampener right here, and then you put it over the spacer, it's all locked in. And then this spacer does touch that bare metal up in the cup, but I guess the dampening could be between these two components right here. So from reading the written description of the Traxda instructions, which I frankly think could have been written a little bit better, from interpreting those and then just kind of the logic, I am going to put the spacer, the dampener, and then the spring. And keep in mind, this is all at the top. In that other guy's video, there was a comment of a person who critiqued him, saying to do it in the order I'm doing here. I tried to look online to find pictures, and I couldn't find any. I suppose I could call Traxda themselves, but it's a weekend and I'm in the project and I'm not going to stop. But Traxda also makes a ton of other lift kits, so I'm not 100% convinced that I would find somebody that would know that specific nuance. So this is the way I'm going to go with it. This seems to make the most logical sense to me. But on your side, you guys do what you think is best. Now, the next question is, I'm going to put in these airbags. Now, the typical instructions would be you wouldn't have to remove the spring. You would pull this, you would roll it up, it would kind of be suctioned to itself, and you could actually weave it in between the spring. But since I have the spring off, I can actually put the airbag in here. Now, I found one installation video online where the guy, so this would be the tube where the air attaches, actually puts the airbag up with the tube upwards, and this little spacer apparently sits over the top of it to protect that. Now, the instructions in here doesn't really specify, but my interpretation is that looks like that's supposed to represent this, which is at the bottom, because this would be like installing it as though it's already in the vehicle, if that makes sense. And then it says down here to put the spacer. So it says push the cylinder to the top of the coil and insert the protector, which would be this device right here, on top of the lower spring seat. So I interpret that to be, well, the lower spring seat. So I am going to install this with this this part right here in the downward position. My point of saying all this is it's not 100% clear, and there are other people who installed it different ways. And the video where the guy installed it upwards, somebody said the same thing. It should have been installed downwards, but there was a discussion that it doesn't make a difference. I don't know. The best I can interpret is I'm going to install this part in the downward position and put this here. And as a prep, I'm going to go ahead and just put this in now before I put the spring in, just to save some time. Hopefully the spring goes in pretty easy. That seems like the toughest part of this. So far, this has been pretty easy though. All right, well, we are into the night, and it's been a little bit of a long night. And I finally got the springs in. Let me get another light here, hold on. All right, so we finally got the springs in. So first we had to do the shock extension. So the shock is this block right here, and the shock fits in the bottom, screws in the top, and then the top of that you bolt in from the inside where I showed you guys the regular shock bolt would have been, and that lowers the shock because the swing arm now is going to be in a slightly lower position. Something that everybody talked about was how hard it was to get these springs in, and it was a little bit of a challenge. I probably worked with it for about an hour and a half. Could have been worse. How do I get them in there? Well, the axle was all the way down, like you guys saw, and each of them had a spring compressor on it, and I just kind of fit them in and banged them in with the hammer. This side went in with one spring compressor. I removed the spring compressor from this side, and then the other side I had to compress it in two locations and fit it in. Like I said, it took me about an hour and a half of fiddling around with it, but I think we got it. So next step is I'm gonna go ahead and route the airlines for the airbags. I am curious as how these work. I don't know if they inflate lengthwise or if they just get bigger around and it kind of limits the movement of the spring. I'm not really sure how they work, because there's a lot of, as you guys can see, there's a lot of play, and that has nothing to do with the lift because that's above the point of the spring there. So I'm kind of curious how that works out. And then I will put the tires on, lower it, and then remember the very final step is once it's on the ground, then we will tighten up this control arm bushing bolt or nut. I don't know what you call it, but right here where my light's shining. All right. All right, guys, it's a new morning, and we've got the rear end was finished last night. If you guys recall, I accidentally snagged, or I didn't disconnect that brake line or the ABS line, and I was a little worried I damaged it. Last night I got the tire on, and I drove the van around, and no light came on. Everything seemed to work, so I think I'm okay with the ABS side. It might have settled a little bit, but that's the lift in the rear. If you measure right there from the edge, the bottom, or the section of the body panel down, it's about 10 inches. So now we're going to roll into the front, and I'll also replace the passenger side CV axle. I got that sitting right here. When I do it, supposedly the putting the spacers in the struts up here in the front is easier than the rear, so that's why I tackled the rear first. So what I've done here is I've removed the windshield wipers. So that was a little bit easier than I thought it was. I was kind of worried. But these little plastic tabs here, these come off of here. And then there's just this bolt. So I pulled this bolt. I don't know if my valance was missing snaps or bolts or something, but it was basically just kind of a friction fit in there. I don't know if this is factory or somebody did it, but there was like a little bit of an adhesive right here. So I'll peel that off and put a new adhesive when I put it in place. What I have to do now is you'll have to remove the wiper motor, which is, from what I could tell, it's just a bolt here, and I thought I saw another bolt someplace. I don't know. But and then you'll have to disconnect the electrical cable here. Good time to clean all the debris out of here, as you guys can imagine. And then from there, I'm going to do the driver's side first. Pull off the wheel, or we'll lift it up, pull off the wheel, and go from there. But anyways, the reason that you got to pull all this off is you got to access the top of the bolts here to the strut. But basically what you'll do is you'll pull out the strut, you'll unbolt some stuff down at the control arm, which I'll show you guys. And then the spacer will just sit on top of the strut, and you just put it back together. But for what I could tell, this should be easier. So let's get to it. All right, so pulled out the wiper blade motor, pulled off the bolts up here. Remember, add PB Blaster, WD-40, something like that. I have not pulled out the nuts yet because all this stuff will come out, but I loosen up the nuts for the upper control. I don't know what you call it, the knuckle here. Remove the ABS and brake line brackets. Remember from last time, that's important. And I removed the sway bar bolts. Like I said, the nut, this uses a specialty nut, so make sure you use the right socket so you don't damage it. That socket's going to look like this, and it's 30 millimeter. These were 19. There was some 14s and 17s millimeters. So we're going to start removing this stuff, and I'll put a jack underneath here because it will be free. These all, like I said, my car has low corrosion here. I still use the PV Blaster and everything, a penetrating oil, but impact socket makes a big help here. Or impact gun makes a big help in terms of getting all these off. All right, so this is actually going pretty smooth. Let me walk over, recap what we did. So we pulled off the top tower bolts for the strut, pulled off the ABS brake line, pulled out these two nuts right here on the knuckle, and we pulled off the nuts on the sway bar here. I have a jack underneath here, as you guys can see, that I lowered this down. They say it's very important to remove this nut. I'm not really sure why, but I did, just because that's what they said. And then the strut just kind of came right out. So, I mean, I'm not going to say it takes 5 minutes to do all that, but it went pretty smooth. I have a car with low corrosion, so I made it easier. But so now you got the strut out, and then the spacer here, which is, this is an example of one that's not on, just sits over the existing nuts. So these would be the ones that come through at the top of the tower there. You bolt these down. I added some thread locker, and then this will just go in reverse, and then these bolts here, or studs, will go up through. You'll bolt those down. You know, you'll attach your knuckle, all that kind of stuff. The kit I have has smaller sway bar links, so we'll put those in. Because I'm guessing they're smaller, because this is the stock one here. I'm guessing they're smaller because the whole strut is being pushed down and the knuckle is being pushed down a little bit. I'm just thinking this out through my mind here as I'm sitting here. Yeah, I guess that's why they include the smaller ones. And like I said, there was a kit that didn't have these, and they said you might need them, you don't need them. I don't know. I just went ahead and got them. These actually look like my stock ones actually seem to have a little bit of wear in them, so it's probably not a bad idea to replace them with these new ones. So, all right, let's put it in reverse, and I'll show you that when it's done. I'll let you know if there's any major problems. All right, so we've got this all done. This wasn't too bad, actually. Yeah, I think it still probably took me about an hour and a half, but that's just because I'm slow. But it was pretty straightforward. The hardest part was... So as a side note, I did this on my own. There's a lot of people say that you need two people, and it would definitely be helpful. But, you know, you just feed this up in there, kind of wedge the strut here down on the knuckle someplace, and you can get the bolts up there hand tightened. And then I just used a shock here and placed it underneath the control arm and kind of raise and lower it and just kind of move it around and wiggle it in place until you can get these bolts in. And then you can... you know, put in your sway bar extenders. These are the new ones, and definitely see why they're shorter. You know, get your nut on, just make sure that you tighten everything down. But yeah, not too bad, not too bad. We're going to do the other side. I'll be replacing the passenger side CV axle. We'll see how that goes. But you know, this is definitely easier than the rear. Pretty straightforward. A little bit of prying here and there, but nothing too crazy. All right, guys, so the full kit has been installed. I did the other side of the front, but it's obviously identical to the side that you guys saw. And how does it ride? Basically exactly like it rode prior to the lift. I honestly don't tell a difference, so I think that's a good thing. Now I'll admit I've only put about 20 miles on it since I've put the lift on. If anything changes, I will let you guys know. But I think this was a success. Definitely got a little bit, you guys can see a little bit of a stance, but it's very subtle. I don't think most people would probably notice it. My next step is I'll put some all-terrain tires on it. They're going to be something that should maintain the current ride quality. All right, guys, and to finish the suspension part of this build, I got some new tires. So these are the Yokohama Geolander Geo 15. These are in 235, 65, 17. So these are just one step larger than the stock tires, which are 235, 60. That amounts to about 9/10 of an inch bigger in overall diameter. And there is a slight speedometer error of about 3 miles an hour at 65 miles an hour. So if you're going 62, you're probably going about 65. But I think it looks great. I've probably got 100 miles on the lift. Everything sounds great. You know, no odd noises. You know, like I said, as far as drivability, I don't really notice a difference at all. I mean, there's got to be, but it seems to handle the same. Yeah, I mean, it just seems to drive exactly like it was before. But, you know, have a little bit more clearance. Even the larger tire, I mean, I know there's got to be a difference in terms of acceleration and stuff, but just casual driving, you don't really notice it. I did get an alignment done, but the only thing that was off was the toe, and my assumption is that's because of the lift, so I got that corrected. And so yeah, I think this is a good option. It's a little hard to measure, but from the best I could tell, my overall ground clearance now is about 9 to 9.5 inches. I think there's, like I said, it's a little hard to kind of crawl underneath there still, but I think there's one part of my exhaust which is probably right about 9 inches. But that's pretty good ground clearance. I mean, that's the same ground clearance as my Outback Wilderness. Now, of course, the departure and ascent angles of the front are going to be, you know, not as beneficial, but I think for the casual, you know, light to medium duty desert trail driving I'll be doing in this, I think the two-wheel drive with this lift and the all-terrain tires, I think is going to be more than enough. So I really recommend this Traxda lift. I have no association with them. I mean, I just bought it on my own, but it really, you know, a little bit of work to install, but in terms of, it doesn't seem to have any real effective drivability, and I think it's going to get me what I want. I'll include a before and after picture. You can tell a difference, but I don't think, if you didn't know what it looked like before, I don't think a casual observer would really look at this and notice some difference. Maybe someone who is really astute might look at it and say something looks a little bit beefier on it, but yeah, guys, I think this is a good option.